but it was my worst year as a leader, but it was also transformational. And it's moved into this year now where I'm more excited than I've ever been. I think my leadership team is behind me more than they've ever been. And, it's all about having this great year, getting back to, doing the things we want to do. So,
welcome to Build Your Culture Brand with Dr. Jay Rains. As leaders, you have the ability to design and lead culture intentionally. Hear from culture leaders who are moving from a values list to values lived.
Welcome back to the Build Your Culture Brand podcast. I'm bringing back to you a previous guest, Mark Hufford, whom we interviewed on another episode, and there was just so much more in that episode that I wanted to be able to share with you, that I wanted to make sure we were able to highlight these particular topics in a special way. So we'll jump into the conversation in just a minute. Mark Hufford is a Chick-fil-A owner-operator in Northwest Arkansas, there in Bentonville and Rogers, Arkansas. So he talks about in the previous episode about how he was awarded that second location during a tough time, and there are circumstances that led up to that over the death of a friend, a fellow owner-operator, a friend of both of ours, but yet then the blessing of taking over one of those locations and some of the challenges in leading that team and guiding them through a very difficult time. We unpack some of those changes and some of the new practices that he has. But then also in this episode, he highlights that, in the couple of years after that happened, in this last year through the end of COVID and just some other challenges, he really faced what he calls the toughest leadership year for him. And so we get into that, and he shares very openly about some of the indicators that he noticed going into it, but also his pathway out of that and some of the recovery and really the growth that they've had since that moment of truth. And so listen now as I jump in right kind of in the middle of a conversation about those challenges of multi and leading two locations, and then it gets into some of these other topics that I'm mentioning today. So you mentioned a minute ago about a change in leadership style moving to a second location. In fact, you were already preparing in your thinking about how to lead an organization that's ready for more of an enterprise. We call that enterprise level. It's not focused on one location. You're looking at it as a larger enterprise. So what were some of the leadership skills that you had to, or leadership thinking that you had to change to be ready for that?
Yeah, I mean, again, just the capacity is one of those things. And sometimes that involves who are the people at your top of your leadership structure team, and are they going to also increase in their capacity moving into multi-restaurant? And some people are going to stay in one store, but over time, you need to have some people that are helping you over both stores. And what does that look like, and identifying that. And I had to figure that out. And in that process too, you have some people that move on, and so there was change that occurred in both restaurants. And so while I'm learning how to run two stores, also learning how to develop the people and the structure to be able to do that as well. Yeah, we literally have just completed going through all the role descriptions with success factors, measurable outcomes, all that for all of our C-suite, our chief officers. I have 3 of those, and then our store directors. And we just literally have completed that, in the last month or two. And, we're over 3 years in.
That's incredible. I'm thinking about, we have five of our clients in the last several months were just awarded a second location. So hopefully they're listening here and just thinking through, like, okay, as I move into that role, what are some of those challenges? And some of the people that got you there won't get you to that next level. And what you did was you gave them the opportunity. I saw you do this. You you called them up to that next level, and some opted out and some opted in. Um, but the challenge was clarifying, what does this new level require of you? And I'll help you get there, but that was a challenge for everyone.
Yeah. I remember I had Alan Kaiser. He's a great multi-restaurant operator in Conway, Arkansas, a good friend. Had him come out. My process for multi-restaurant sort of had him do a visit with some of his leaders. And one of the things he told us, he said, some of you won't be there. He said, Mark, some of these folks, will rise up, and others you're going to be replacing them. Some will rise up and some won't. And he was exactly right, in that process. So.
And I know some of those people, right? And they launched into something that was better for them. So it was actually, there were good moments. And so there was really a launch that took place.
Yeah, that's our value proposition. We'll know you, grow you, launch you. And look, for most people, Chick-fil-A isn't life, right? They're not going to work for us 20, 30 years. It's also a great privilege when you can launch somebody forward to their next thing. So I believe that, God brings certain things into our life. There's, whether it's a change in a business or a personal change, where he's moving, it happens to be the timing wise, he's moving that person on to their next thing. One of my best directors that I've ever had that moved on during that time had become a mom, and now I see her at our local bank whenever I go over there. It's just exactly what she needed. And so, but some of that change and everything sort of facilitated that. And it's neat that, is positive.
It is, yeah. And part of leadership is managing that to make it as positive as possible. So good job. You've handled it well and navigated so many of those changes. All right, Mark. So thanks for sharing with us about, some of the challenges of multi-site. One of the things I've noticed is that even if you have 2 locations or 3 locations, there are some differences that are often kind of natural and okay, but yet you want there to be alignment. So what are some ways that you really push for alignment, and what are some areas that differences are okay or just natural?
As I said, a lot of this has really come when it comes to alignment. It's been a process over 3 years where not everything is perfectly aligned yet, but for the most part, things are. And when I think about those things for alignment and where I want alignment and unity, I think about, of course, org structure, role descriptions. We have the same mission, purpose, core values. I know there's some I've seen some play. It's not right or wrong, I guess, but for me, I like alignment on that versus, 2 different stores having 2 different mission statements, I'll say, kind of thing. We'll try and do best practices and have alignment there when it comes to money, end of month, some of those just very basic things, so that if we have people going back and forth between the 2 stores as well, it's seamless that way. Individual personality. I mean, you're going to have different, little bit different culture, personality-wise, not value-wise, at each store. And so there's also unique context to where each store is. And, what are their strengths, weaknesses, depending on their the context around the store. So I think where you can have not be aligned is goals can be store specific. Where you've got a focus can be different. One store may be really big for mobile curbside. The other store isn't. That could be something. One store has single lane drive through, another one has double lane drive through, like mine have. So there's those kind of differences. You're looking at there's different ways you're doing them and different ways you're bagging and all those kind of things. And I think that's pretty self-apparent. But third party, are you going to do that or not do that? Well, you can have 4 miles away, and West Walnut has a very different situation than Bentonville has. Is that kind of helpful?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I know and so that's really good. I like how you divided the ideas of alignment on values and mission, vision, all that, but especially that values piece, and then contextualizing for the geography of maybe how our building's designed, or even the personalities involved. I mean, it just kind of takes a life of its own based on those personalities. In fact, you mentioned Bruce Poser a while ago. One of the leaders last week, I was having a conversation with Jessica there, and she said we call it siblings. We're in the same family. We have the same family values, but it's like we're siblings in a family. So I like that kind of language.
It's kind of been interesting because in our situation, the last couple of years, different people have struggled at various degrees with staffing. I've had some big issues with staffing, and so we've had a lot of back and forth. Where okay, this store's short today. A couple people go from Bentonville to West Walnut. The next day, it's West Walnut to Bentonville, and in that, then it's not quite like siblings or what I've seen in other stores where things are more stable and they sort of develop a little bit of a different personality. Um, they do, but it's just not as much as it probably will be down the road when as we get staffed stronger and we don't have as much of that going back and forth with team members and leaders and stuff.
Okay. So there is a sharing that can happen, and that it has an effect on culture. I know lately too, one of the things I heard you talk about was there's kind of a meeting that takes place between some of the roles in the different locations. Is there something like strategic about having someone in this role and someone in the other same role meet together?
Well, we do. We have a training director at Bentonville. Right now, that position is not being filled at West Walnut. We're developing somebody, and they're the training area lead, a step below being a director. And so they meet together on a somewhat regular basis. Some of it's sharing, but it's also some coaching and development going on there from the training director to the area training lead at West Walnut.
Okay. So kind of a mentoring relationship can be really helpful when you have two locations. That's
Oh yeah,
interesting.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good. One of the questions, thinking about failure, right? So what's a recent something that you might call a failure, but actually it ended up propelling you forward?
Yeah, of course we know each other really well. We have for a long time, and but yeah, last year was for me as an operator was my toughest year of my career. Uh, it actually surpassed my first year, which I never thought would happen. It was different, of course, but it had to do more with the stress pressure of kind of 3 years running of COVID, challenges with staffing, challenges with profit. Uh, I actually labeled it when I was able to process through it towards the end of the year and came out with what turned out to be, in a lot of ways, I've said this, it was um, my weakest or my most challenging year as a leader. Is not, but I felt like I had a bad year as a leader. But on the end, there's a lot of growth. But I dealt with fear, fear of the unknown, frustration, things not going as planned and all the things going on in the world, fatigue. I was dealing with a shoulder that needed to have surgery and I was waiting because we were trying to move into a house, and failure. And I think a lot of that failure was perceived failure because we compare ourselves to other people. But I call them the four F's. But what that caused was kind of a convergence of anxiety. And so when that, I started focusing in on all the negatives. I lost my clear preferred picture of the future, that vision, to be that strong visionary leader. I was more negative, harsher, with my officers and directors, and was kind of in a dark place, quite honestly. And in the fall, uh, I had had a meeting where I'd walked out of the meeting with my leaders, and it didn't. It was actually a bit strategic in what I did. If they responded a certain way, I was going to walk out and kind couple of days later, I really was processing that and realized the problem wasn't them, it was me. And, personally, just to be open, that happened in a time of prayer before the Lord, and my heart really was broken over that. And, really realized that I hadn't really understood this. The understanding came pretty quickly that the pressure and the stress and the anxiety of stuff that had been going on it's like boiling the frog 1 degree at a time. I didn't really realize how bad it had become and how much I'd lost my true north, and almost lost one of my best leaders over that. Fortunately, they hung in there with me, and I was able to share what had gone on. Completely transformed me. Suddenly the light comes, the sun comes out, and nothing changed in my environment, but everything changed inside me. And the interesting thing is, I remember in that time of prayer and what was going on, I was like, gosh, Lord, I thought I was better than that, more mature than that, long-term operator, and pride was involved in that. So there's a lot of things but it was my worst year as a leader, but it was also transformational. And it's moved into this year now where I'm more excited than I've ever been. I think my leadership team is behind me more than they've ever been. And, it's all about having this great year, getting back to, doing the things we want to do. So I don't know if that was very too convoluted.
No, that thank you for one, that just the humility, the transparency of that. I'm just imagining I imagine there's someone's listening right now who is right there where you were, when all this was at its hardest. And so hopefully they will hear that, one, there's another side to it. There is a breakthrough that's possible. And so I appreciate your willingness to share that. I've never seen your team more aligned. There's so much energy among especially your top leaders, the ones I'm interacting with. And so, and you're starting to see the fruit of that alignment. So, but yeah, tough time. And I'm thinking back, there's a lot of operators and other leaders just around the world, right, that were still dealing with the trauma that happened during COVID. I like to think of it as there was an earthquake, and it's like there was a bridge involved in this earthquake, and no one could see cracks in the bridge until now. We're starting to see those cracks kind of show up. We all pushed through with kind of adrenaline, and we got things done. But what I hear you describing is you ran out of adrenaline. There were more challenges ahead, and it was just you kind of hit a wall. Does that describe it fairly well?
You're going along, you think you're doing good, you think you're doing fine, and it was it's like an endurance run, where at some point it's kind of like not getting the fuel, and you got to be really self-aware. One of the things I learned about, with chronic anxiety, there's different forms of anxiety, but chronic anxiety is also called leadership anxiety. It's the very thing I was dealing with. And you have expectations of what reality is and things that they're, impossible to meet. But chronic anxiety is the only anxiety that's contagious. So all of my leaders last year suffered because of me under the anxiety and stress I was under. I wasn't doing well. They struggled. And so I've learned a lot about this. I did a lot of self-research and looking into this, and that was a big part of the big motivator to go, hey, I want to make sure this doesn't happen again to me, but also help them understand and help them learn and understand this as well, because this can happen to anybody. None of us are averse to it, and so it's been interesting as I started, and we know this, when a leader does better, is doing well, then that's the best opportunity for those below him or her to do well. If the leader's not doing well and they're struggling, then it's going to affect those around them. So I was fortunate. God was gracious. My team hung in there with me, and so it's pretty special right now to be where we are. From where we were at this time a year ago, it was some of probably the toughest time of my career.
What a tribute to them too for carrying you at a difficult time and sticking with you. And now y'all are so much stronger together. You made it through that challenge. So it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's good to be on the other side as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone listening today. I want to thank Mark Hufford for being on the show and sharing transparently about some of the challenges that he's recently faced. I'm excited about their team. We've been able to work with their team for several years now, and one of the things that we've been able to do with them is to help them create their own culture brand. And so Mark referred to this earlier, and to help you understand a little bit more about that, it's our way to help you design and build the culture that you dream of. And so they're able to measure behavior and how everyone should show up to the team, and even on how to get results, how to team together, how to do character. And so all of that's built into a very simple tool that's unique to each team, each organization. So if you're in need of something like that, we can help you design and build your own culture brand and use it in your organization in a powerful way, just like Mark has. So if you're interested, go visit us at buildyourculturebrand.com, and there are more resources and contact information there. I look forward to getting to know you.
Thank you for listening to Build Your Culture Brand with Dr. Jay Rains. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. We would like to note that Leaders Q serves individual owner-operators and their teams and is not affiliated, endorsed by, or in any way officially connected with Chick-fil-A Incorporated.